Yes, greatness of AEW is officially back. This episode gave us a 5-star match, black goo, and a 62-year-old man moving like this. I'm 22, I would break my bones in 69 places. And I'm a trained professional, I watch Ryback's TikToks. So I'm watching AEW again, and I've been watching for the past few weeks now. I actually wanted to make reviews of the 2 previous shows as well, but the thing is, I decided to get more familiar with the product instead of just asking you guys what the hell is going on. And I gotta be honest, man, I love what I'm seeing. Finally, professional wrestling is professional wrestling again. The show gives me a more mature vibe, a more edgy vibe. I've said this already, but it feels more real. I'm sure some of you feel the same way. When I'm watching Dynamite, a lot of the times I say, okay, this would not happen in the WWE. This wouldn't happen in WWE, and this wouldn't happen in WWE. I say all of that during one MJF promo. Pretty much. And I kinda regret not making the reviews of the past AEW shows, because these shows were 2 of the best Dynamite episodes I've ever seen. Lately, they're just absolutely killing it. Now, this episode of AEW Dynamite was called Grand Slam. It had about 20,000 people in the audience. And a lot of times, whether it's WWE or AEW, people are complaining it's not a real number. They're lying. It's not a real number. It's not 20,000. It's 19,999, bitch. I don't care. I really don't care. All I care about is that's a lot of people. Wow. They're making a lot of noise. I'm happy. The biggest match of the night was obviously Kenny Omega versus BRYAN Danielson. We all knew it's gonna be good, but oh boy, it exceeded our expectations. This might be the match of the year. Now, this match actually kicked off the show. The New York crowd are going absolutely nuts, and the match didn't even start. Now, this was a non-title match, so, it made things a bit more unpredictable. Now, I'm happy with the fact that AEW has a time limit. At first, I hated this idea, but when you think about it, you can get away with a lot. You don't want your champion to lose, you don't want your big superstar to lose in his debut match. A draw. I know it sounds bad and unexciting, but the match made up for it. It's wild that we just saw an amazing 30-minute match opening a TV wrestling show. And just like Daniel Bryan said during interviews, he just wants to go wild. Vince McMahon is very protective, and Daniel Bryan wants to kick some heads. That's exactly what happened during this match. You can see so much aggression. Everything was a lot more stiff. Shit's about to go down when you see Daniel Bryan's chest like this. Now, since we all know Bryan Danielson's medical history, it's always hard to watch these stiff, hard spots. Now, some of the best spots of the match were this, and this, and this. It's like Bryan Danielson was like, okay, this is a dangerous move. How can I make it even more dangerous? And even though knowing Daniel Bryan's medical history, sometimes it was a bit uncomfortable to watch. We're not doctors. It's not our job to decide what the man can do and what the man cannot do. Now, luckily AEW has a time limit, so the match didn't end in some shitty DQ or a count out. The match ended in a draw, and I know a lot of people complained. What did you honestly expect? It's like Bryan and Kenny knew that this match is going to be a draw, so at least let's give them one of the best matches they ever saw. I think it's pretty smart, because you just saw a great match and you didn't get a result. So now you're gonna pay for a pay-per-view ticket or buy the pay-per-view and watch that match again. And this time, hopefully, for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. So this match ended in a draw. We saw the Young Bucks kicking Daniel Bryan in the face. Then we saw Christian Jungle Boy coming for the save. What a way to open the show. Now, honestly, I do believe it should have been the main event for obvious reasons. But I also understand why it wasn't. The main event was a women's championship match, and they want to make that championship look important. And also, people in the audience saw Rampage as well. They saw CM Punk wrestling, so we got a bit of a different experience than people in the audience. Now, especially with AEW, with the current roster, I like how there's literally no bad filler. Everything is pretty much exciting. Now, you just saw Kenny Omega versus Daniel Bryan. We're gonna see CM Punk. We're gonna see a championship match. We're gonna see MJF. We're gonna see Adam Cole. We're gonna see all of these guys. The roster is unbelievably good. And I honestly, right now especially, I'm very excited for the video game. And by the way, Dave Meltzer gave this match 5 stars. I mean, it's subjective. It's one man's opinion. It doesn't really matter as much as some people think, but I'm sure it's still pretty important to some wrestlers. Then we saw CM Punk. He's glad he didn't have to wrestle after this match. Who could follow that? He says it's been a long time since pro wrestling has been in New York City because WWE is sports entertainment. And oh boy am I entertained! He says people wanna see him get mad, like the old CM Punk. And he will be at some point, but be careful what you wish for. Then he talks about Team Taz and how they don't want to hear Cult of Personality. They don't want CM Punk to be happy. And you know, at first he wasn't mad because every time he hears that music, the crowd, he's happy. But he realized Team Taz are trying to take that away from him. But right now, nobody's going to take wrestling away from CM Punk. I like how at first CM Punk was like, I'm back because, you know, I want to help talent. I couldn't return to WWE because it got me sick. Right now he's like, dude, I miss this shit. I miss wrestling. He says it's not his job to wake other wrestlers up, it's to put them to sleep. And on Friday's Rampage, Hobbs is going to sleep. So at Rampage, we are going to see CM Punk versus Hobbs. Now, I didn't see spoilers. What I did see is a photo of CM Punk's attire, and he's back to wearing trunks. That's great. Like I've said, I don't want to see this 42 or whatever old man wearing pants. I want to see him in his underwear. That's what I want to see. Yes. Then we saw MJF versus Brian Pillman Jr., which was a pretty interesting match. I love the story. Unfortunately, I didn't make reviews, so I didn't talk about it. But I absolutely love the story. During these 2 promos by MJF, all the time I felt, okay, in these 2-3 minutes, we just heard stuff we couldn't hear in the WWE in like 2 years. I also love how the commentators are talking about MJF. Someone said he's a scum, and the other commentator said he's like a bacteria on his scum. And that's why we love him. Never change. And MJF picked up the W with a submission. Obviously, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm not saying Brian Pillman Jr. is bad, but he still has so much to learn, especially during promos. And MJF is just on a whole different level. Then we saw Cody versus Malachi Black, a big rematch. Now, a lot of people are complaining about Cody's entrance. People are saying it's a bit too fancy. I don't know. I know where people are coming from. I mean, he's an authority figure of AEW. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Although I gotta say, I do see that sometimes Cody's trying way too much. I love it for the most part. I think he's a great talker, but sometimes he's trying to make this emotional moment out of nothing, and sometimes it feels really unorganic. Now, this was a great match, loved it. I haven't seen their first match, so I can't really compare. Brandy interfering was a pretty cool spot of the match. We saw Black Goo missed whatever, and Malachi Black wins the match. By the way, love his attire. Now, with all that being said, I do believe that Cody is getting way too much shit from the wrestling fans just because he's an authority figure. The man literally puts over everyone he feuds with. Then we saw FTR versus Sting and Darby Allin. It's crazy that in 2021 we can still enjoy watching Sting in the ring. Now, this was a great match, and Sting can still keep up with the young guys. That's actually crazy to me, and it doesn't even have to be that way. All you need from Sting is a one power slam, a few punches, and a finisher, and that would be totally enough. Just his name makes this match a lot more, marquee or whatever. But the man can move. He's pretty fast, and obviously a tag team match makes it easier for him, but his performance at that age is still pretty impressive. The finish was great. We saw a Scorpion Deathlock and a coffin drop on the apron. How the f do you not get hurt? It's like most of the wrestlers who are doing dives are like, okay, I'm gonna jump and I'm gonna push him so I don't get hurt and hurt my opponent, it will look alright. Darby is like, I'ma jump, and then we'll see. So Sting and Darby Allin picked the W. This might be the best wrestler and manager duo we ever seen. And of course, the main event of the show was Britt Baker versus Ruby Soho, AEW Women's World Championship match. This was also a pretty good match, but like I've said, I wish Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson and Kenny Omega main evented the show, because that match was just on a whole different level and you can't realistically follow that. With that being said, I'm happy AEW finally figured it out. The women's division is looking a lot better, even though, like I've said, a lot of women still didn't find their characters. But the positive of this match being in the main event, it made things a lot more unpredictable. Obviously, Ruby Soho is going to be a big star in AEW, and it's a main event, so you don't really know what's gonna happen. During this match, we saw a lot of interferences, and this ultimately cost Ruby Soho the match. Britt Baker won with the submission, and that was your AEW Dynamite Grand Slam. So that was a great show. We saw a lot of great wrestling, but man, it was not 20,000. It was 19,999. Anyway, I've missed this type of wrestling. Can't wait to make more AEW reviews. I'm actually excited about every show right now, which, you know, is barely the case with the WWE, except for SmackDown sometimes. But even SmackDown sometimes gets pretty repetitive. So thank you for watching The Great One. Peace, love, and hugs. It's been a pleasure.